Lena Marshall walked into the small, charming jewelry store on Oak Street with a smile on her face. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow on the glass counters filled with sparkling necklaces, rings, and bracelets. The store was quiet, just the way Lena liked it. She wasn't looking for anything expensive or extravagant. It was her niece's birthday soon, and she had promised to buy her something special. A simple bracelet or a cute charm would do. Lena wasn't the type of person to wear much jewelry herself, but she enjoyed the beauty of it. Today, however, she wasn't there for herself. Her niece had been asking for a little something to wear, something that would make her feel grown up. Lena had the money, and more than that, she had the joy of giving. She walked past the counters, her eyes scanning the shelves, trying to find something that would be perfect. As she wandered toward a display of silver necklaces, she noticed a man standing near the door. He was tall, with dark hair, and dressed in a plain suit that didn't seem to stand out in the store. At first, Lena thought he might be another shopper. She gave him a polite smile as she picked up a necklace, turning it over in her hands to check the price tag. The man, however, wasn't browsing like the rest of the customers. He was watching her. Lena felt an odd sense of unease, but she brushed it off. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. She picked up a delicate silver chain with a small heart-shaped pendant, imagining how her niece would light up when she saw it. It wasn't too flashy, but it was sweet, and that's exactly what she wanted. Lena turned toward the counter to make her way to the register, but as she did, she noticed the man was no longer standing by the door. He had moved closer. Her heart skipped a beat when he suddenly appeared right behind her. "Excuse me," he said in a low voice. "That's a beautiful necklace. Are you planning on buying it?" Lena nodded, trying to hide her surprise. "Yes, it's for my niece. Her birthday is next week." The man smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "She'll love it," he said. "But you should be careful. People can be quick to judge here. You wouldn't want anyone thinking you were stealing, would you?" Lena froze. His tone was strange, too casual, but there was something unsettling about it. She shook off the feeling, telling herself that maybe she was overthinking things. "I'm just here to buy a gift," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. Before she could say anything else, the store's manager walked up, smiling warmly. "Ready to check out?" she asked. Lena nodded, still feeling the lingering discomfort from the stranger's words. But she didn't let it bother her too much. After all, she was just a simple woman trying to do something nice. She handed the necklace to the manager, thinking everything was perfectly normal, until the sirens blared and everything. Just as Lena handed the necklace to the manager, the sharp sound of an alarm pierced through the peaceful hum of the store. She froze, confused and startled. The manager's smile faded, her eyes scanning the room as the alarm blared louder, causing other shoppers to turn their heads. The air felt heavy, like something bad was about to happen. Before Lena could react, a security guard rushed over, looking tense. "Ma'am," he said to the manager, his voice hurried, "there's been an alert. We need to check her bag." Lena's heart began to race. Her mind raced with confusion. What was going on? She had just picked up a necklace for her niece and hadn't even paid yet. There was no reason for this to be happening. She wasn't sure if she was dreaming or if the world around her had suddenly turned upside down. The manager, clearly flustered, quickly nodded and gestured toward Lena. "We'll have to check your bag, ma'am," the security guard said firmly, his eyes cold and suspicious. Lena felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know what was happening. "There's no need," she said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just buying a gift. I've done nothing wrong." But before she could explain further, the manager reached for her bag, her face full of concern. As the guard opened it, Lena's stomach dropped. She watched in horror as the guard pulled out a gold bracelet, one she didn't recognize. It wasn't hers. "This isn't mine," Lena exclaimed, her voice shaky. "I didn't put that there. I swear, I didn't take anything." The manager and security guard exchanged a look. There was no mistaking it. The bracelet was clearly expensive, something that didn't belong in Lena's simple, everyday bag. "We'll have to call the police," the manager said, her voice trembling. "This is serious." Lena's chest tightened. She didn't know what to do. All she could think was how she couldn't afford to have her name dragged through the mud for something she hadn't done. How did this happen? She thought, barely able to breathe. She glanced around, hoping someone would step in, but the other customers were just staring, some shaking their heads in disbelief. As the police arrived, Lena tried to explain herself over and over, but no one seemed to believe her. The officer, a tall man with a stern expression, wasn't interested in her story. "Ma'am, we'll have to take you to the station for questioning. You're being accused of theft." Lena's heart shattered. Theft? She couldn't understand how this was happening. She had only come in to buy a simple necklace, nothing more. Everything she worked for, everything she had built in her quiet life, was now in jeopardy because of a piece of jewelry that didn't belong to her. Just as the officer started to guide her out, she saw a familiar face. Her husband, Chief John Marshall, the town's police chief, was standing by the door. He had been watching the whole thing unfold from a distance, completely unaware that his own wife was the one being accused. Lena's eyes locked with his, and she opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Her husband's face was calm, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the scene. He knew something wasn't right, but he didn't move. Instead, he stood there, silently watching, his mind already starting to work through the possibilities. Lena was led out of the jewelry store in handcuffs, her mind spinning with confusion and fear. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars reflected in the windows, casting an eerie glow on everything around her. She kept her head low, avoiding the gazes of the other shoppers and customers who had gathered outside, whispering and staring. Her chest tightened with every step, and the weight of the accusations felt unbearable. How had it come to this? The officers were silent as they guided her toward the police car. She tried to steady her breathing, but it was no use. Her mind raced with questions. Why had they thought she was a thief? She had never stolen anything in her life. The bracelet, the one that had been found in her bag, wasn't hers. She was sure of it. She didn't even remember seeing it before. Someone had set her up. As the car doors slammed shut, Lena was taken to the local police station. She didn't know what to expect, but she didn't feel like she was walking into a place that would help her. Instead, it felt like walking into a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. The sound of the door locking behind her echoed in her ears, and she could already hear her heartbeat pounding louder in her chest. She wanted to scream, to explain everything, but the words stuck in her throat. They led her to an interrogation room, cold and sterile, and sat her down at a table. A single light hung above her head, making the room feel even smaller. Her hands shook as she clasped them together on the table, trying to keep herself calm. This was a mistake, she kept thinking. It has to be. They'll figure it out. But as the minutes ticked by, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She was just an ordinary woman, a simple woman with a family, a life, a job. She didn't deserve to be treated like a criminal. She thought back to the moment she had entered the store, the strange man who had spoken to her, and how everything had shifted in the blink of an eye. Was he involved in this? She couldn't help but wonder. Was he the one who planted the bracelet in her bag? Then, just as Lena's thoughts started to spiral, the door to the interrogation room opened. A man in a suit stepped inside, his face familiar. It was her husband, John Marshall, the police chief of their town. His expression was unreadable as he stepped toward the table and sat down across from her. Lena's heart skipped a beat. He's here, she thought. He's here to help me. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she wasn't expecting, something that made her stomach drop. He wasn't looking at her with the warmth and comfort she was used to. Instead, there was something else in his gaze, something sharp, like he was already deep into solving a case. But what could he be thinking? Did he believe she was guilty too? Lena, John said, his voice low but firm. Tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning. Lena opened her mouth to speak, but her words got tangled in her throat. This is my husband, she thought. He's supposed to trust me. Why does he look so distant? Start from the moment you walked into the store, John pressed, his voice still calm, but his eyes studying her carefully. Lena's mind raced. She needed to explain everything. The strange man, the bracelet, the way things had spiraled out of control. But how could she do that when her own husband seemed to be questioning her every word? She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice trembling but determined. I didn't steal anything, John. I swear. I didn't put that bracelet in my bag. Lena sat in the interrogation room, her palms sweaty and her mind racing. Every time she looked at her husband, Chief John Marshall, she saw the doubt in his eyes. She had never felt so small, so helpless. This wasn't how she imagined their lives together. How had everything gone so wrong? John was quiet for a moment, listening to her explanation. Lena's words stumbled over each other as she tried to make sense of the situation. How could she make him believe her? How could she explain what happened when she didn't understand it herself? I don't know how it got there, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The bracelet. I never saw it before. I didn't take it, John, I swear. John's eyes softened for just a second, and he leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. His expression remained serious, but there was a hint of concern that broke through his police officer demeanor. He was trying to stay calm, trying to process what she was saying. I know you, Lena, he said quietly, but right now, this doesn't make sense. There's something more to this, and I need to find out what happened. Lena's heart sank. She could tell by his tone that he wasn't doubting her as a person, but something wasn't adding up. His job was to find the truth, no matter what, and right now, the evidence didn't point in her favor. She wanted to scream, to beg him to believe her, but she knew he had to stay objective. He had to do his job, even if it meant looking at her like a suspect. As the seconds ticked by, John stood up abruptly, his mind already working. I'll be back soon, he said, his voice firm. Just sit tight. We'll get this sorted out. Lena watched him leave the room, her chest tight with fear. She wanted to trust him, but the distance in his eyes made it hard to stay hopeful. What if this went too far? What if the evidence was so overwhelming that even John couldn't defend her? As the door clicked shut, Lena was left alone with her thoughts. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day over and over. She had entered the store so innocently, looking for a gift. The strange man had spoken to her, and now she wondered if he had something to do with the bracelet being slipped into her bag. Was he watching her the whole time? Then something else struck her. Why hadn't John been at the store when it all happened? He was the police chief. If he had been nearby, why hadn't he stepped in when he saw what was happening? The thought made her stomach churn. Had he been watching from the beginning? Just then, the door opened again and one of John's detectives stepped inside. We've got the security footage from the store, he said, holding a small DVD in his hand. Chief Marshall asked us to pull it up. Lena nodded silently, feeling her nerves spike again. The footage, that was it, the key to proving her innocence. But would the footage show the truth? Or would it somehow make things worse? The detective turned to leave, but then stopped at the door. He looked back at her, and for the first time, there was a small glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Don't worry, he said softly. We'll figure this out. Lena closed her eyes, hoping that, just maybe, the truth would come to light before it was too late. Lena sat in the small, cold room, staring at the blank walls as minutes stretched into what felt like hours. She could hear the faint hum of activity outside the door, the sound of officers moving quickly, the shuffle of papers, and the low murmur of voices. But inside the room, it was as if time had frozen. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer pounding against her chest. What was taking so long? She couldn't stop replaying the moments in her mind, the moment she had walked into the jewelry store, the man's strange words, the bracelet appearing in her bag like some kind of cruel magic trick. Someone set me up, she thought desperately. But who? Her thoughts kept racing, but every time she tried to piece together the truth, something didn't make sense. Why had the strange man approached her? Why had he watched her so closely? Had he planned this all along? She had no way of knowing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was behind it all. He was too calm, too smooth. And the way he had left after speaking to her made it clear he had no intention of sticking around. Lena tried to keep her breathing steady, but fear still gripped her heart. She thought of John, her husband, the man she had trusted with everything. The look in his eyes when he had asked her what happened had shattered her. She knew he was trying to stay professional, but it hurt. Would he believe her when the truth came out? The sound of the door opening broke her from her thoughts. John stepped inside, his expression hard to read. He was holding a folder in his hand, the edges of it slightly worn. Lena stood up quickly, her heart leaping. She had never felt so relieved to see him, but the look on his face made her feel uneasy again. It wasn't the comforting look of a husband, it was the stern, calculating look of a chief of police. "Lena," John said, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of tension. "We've got the security footage. I need you to watch it. It's important." Lena nodded quickly, trying to calm the nerves that threatened to spill over. This was it. The footage would either clear her name or bury her deeper in this mess. John handed her a small tablet and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing the view from the store's security cameras. At first, everything looked normal. She could see herself entering the store, walking toward the displays, smiling at the manager. "This is fine," Lena thought, watching the footage play out. "It's just like I remembered." But then, everything shifted on the screen. Just as she was reaching for the necklace, a man in a suit, someone she didn't recognize, slipped past her. He moved quickly, quietly, like a shadow. Lena's heart skipped as she watched the man casually slip something into her bag. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. That's when it happened, she thought, her hands trembling as she watched the footage again. "He put it in my bag." John watched her closely, his eyes never leaving her face as the video continued. Lena wanted to scream to say, "See, I didn't do this," but she held herself together. The footage showed her picking up the necklace and heading to the counter, completely unaware of the bracelet now hidden inside her purse. As the video ended, Lena looked up at John, her breath catching in her throat. The truth was there, right in front of them. She was innocent. She hadn't stolen anything. But how would John react? Would he now believe her? Would he see what she had been trying to say all along? For the first time since she had been brought to the station, Lena saw a flicker of something in her husband's eyes, a mixture of relief and determination. "This isn't over yet," he said quietly, "but we're getting closer to the truth." The room felt colder now, the silence between John and Lena heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. As the security footage replayed in her mind, Lena couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and fear. The truth was there, plain for anyone to see. Yet she still felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if the ground beneath her would hold. "This man," John said, his voice sharp as he stared at the tablet in his hands. He knew exactly what he was doing. Lena nodded, her throat tight. This was it, she thought. Finally, we're getting somewhere. But there was a question she couldn't ignore. Who was this man? "Do we have any idea who he is?" Lena asked, her voice trembling slightly. "He's the one who put the bracelet in my bag. I've never seen him before." John looked at her, his face set in concentration. "We're working on that. We've already pulled his picture from the store's cameras. We'll run it through the database and see if he's connected to anything." Lena could feel her pulse quicken. This was happening. The truth was coming to light. But there was still a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Why? Why would someone do this to her? She was just a regular woman, living a quiet life. What did she have to do with this man's plan? The door opened again and a detective entered, holding a folder. He set it down in front of John, who opened it immediately. The detective didn't say anything at first, just let John skim through the papers. When John looked up, his expression shifted. "Lena," he said slowly, looking at her with new eyes, "we found something." Her heart sank. "What now?" "This man," John continued, his voice steady but his eyes narrowed. "He's been linked to a series of robberies in other towns. Small jewelry stores, places like the one you were at. And in each case, there was a woman who was framed." Lena's stomach turned. Framed? It wasn't just a mistake. This had been part of a plan. Something bigger than she could have imagined. "So, he's done this before?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John nodded. "Looks like it. But the twist is, it seems like he's been using the same tactic. He approaches women who are there to buy something small, then sets them up to take the fall for a theft." Lena shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. Why her? Why had he picked her this time? "Why would he choose me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I don't even know this man. I don't have anything to do with whatever he's involved in." John's eyes softened, but he didn't have an answer. That's what we need to figure out. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She wasn't the first. She wasn't the first person to be tricked, to be framed by this man. But that didn't make it easier. Lena had to wonder how many others were out there, living with the same fear, the same confusion. As John turned to the detective, giving him orders to dig deeper into the suspect's background, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this man had been planning something even worse. This wasn't just about stealing a bracelet, she thought. This was bigger, much bigger. The next few hours were a blur for Lena. As John and the detectives worked, she sat in the small interrogation room, alone with her thoughts. The security footage, the link to the previous crimes, and now the realization that she wasn't the first person to be framed. It all felt like too much to process. Her mind couldn't keep up with the speed of everything happening. John came back in, his expression still serious, but with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We got a name," he said, his voice steady. "We found out who he is." Lena sat up straighter, her heart racing again. This was it. The man who had set her up, the one who had slipped the bracelet into her bag, was finally being exposed. But the question still lingered in her mind. Why her? "His name is Marcus Cole," John continued. "He's been moving through several small towns, hitting jewelry stores and framing women. He's good at staying under the radar, and it looks like he's been doing this for years." Lena's stomach churned. Years? It was unbelievable. The thought that this man had done this to so many people, that he had ruined so many lives like this, made her feel sick. And now, she was just another victim in his plan. She had no idea how to react to all of this, how to feel about the fact that her life had just been turned upside down because of him. What's his motive? Lena asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Why do this? John shook his head. We don't know yet, but we're working on it. We're digging into his past. He's got a few arrests, but nothing that sticks. He's too careful. Lena wanted to ask more, to press for answers, but she could see how exhausted John looked. His mind was running at full speed, and she knew he needed to focus. Still, something gnawed at her. How did he know to pick her? Was she just unlucky, or was there something else behind it? What's next? She asked, hoping to push the conversation forward. John looked at her, his expression softening just slightly. We're going to catch him, Lena. We're close. We've already got his address. He won't be getting away this time. The relief that washed over her was almost overwhelming. For the first time since everything had gone wrong, she felt like there was a chance things could get back to normal. She could clear her name, but she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. Marcus Cole had hurt so many people before her, and he would keep doing it unless they stopped him. What about the other women? Lena asked. There have to be more, right? John nodded, his jaw tightening. We're reaching out to the others now. We're going to make sure they all get justice. Lena felt a strange sense of solidarity with those other women, even though she had never met them. They were all victims of the same man, caught in the same trap. She had no idea how many of them were still out there, but she hoped they would all find peace soon. As John stood up to leave, he turned back to her. I'll be in touch, Lena. You're not alone in this. We'll get him. Lena watched him walk out, her thoughts swirling. This wasn't over yet, but at least now she had hope. She wasn't the only one he had hurt, and together, they were going to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else again. The next morning, Lena woke up in the small apartment above the police station, the weight of the previous day still heavy on her shoulders. Even though she had been cleared of the charges, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare. It was hard to believe everything was over, even though John had promised her that they were getting closer to catching Marcus Cole. As she sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, her phone buzzed. It was a text from John. We've got him. Marcus Cole is in custody. It's over. Lena stared at the message, the words not fully sinking in. It's over. It felt like a dream, and yet, the relief that flooded her was undeniable. She could finally breathe again. The fear, the uncertainty, it was all gone. Marcus Cole, the man who had twisted her life into something unrecognizable, was no longer a threat. She grabbed her phone and quickly typed back, "Thank you." A simple response, but it meant so much to her. John had been her rod through all of this, even when things looked bleak. He never doubted her, even when the evidence seemed to point in the wrong direction. And now, with Marcus in custody, they could finally move forward. Lena stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the busy street below. The world outside was still the same, but everything felt different. She felt different. The past few days had changed her in ways she couldn't quite explain. She had seen what fear could do, what it could make people believe, and she had learned that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. John was standing in the doorway, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You good?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lena nodded, smiling back at him. "Yeah, I think I am." John stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. "You've been through a lot. I don't think I've told you enough how proud I am of how you handled everything." Lena shook her head, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "I just kept telling myself that I had to stay strong. For you, for me, for us." "And you did," John said, his smile growing. "Now it's time to put this all behind us." Lena looked up at him, her heart full. "What happens now?" John's expression softened. "Now we go home. We rebuild. This whole thing has taken enough from you. It's time to take back what's yours." A sense of peace washed over Lena, the kind she hadn't felt in days. She realized in that moment that this was just the beginning. Her life had been turned upside down, but it was still hers to live. And now that she had the truth on her side, nothing could take that away. As John took her hand and led her out of the apartment, Lena felt a sense of clarity she hadn't known she needed. The past was behind them, and whatever came next, they would face it together. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel hopeful about the future. The nightmare was over, and in its place, a new chapter was waiting to begin.